How is it going, Exile? So today I'm showing you my new cast on crit Comet build on a Pathfinder. But before we go into the build, let's look at the showcase here. So first of all, right now we're looking at Arbiter. So as you can see, that guy absolutely melts. Even with me not using Rakiata's Flow, because I feel like it's way too expensive right now. Next thing here, we're looking at max difficulty Xesht. So that guy also doesn't live for more than a couple of seconds. And here's one of your casual Citadel boss. The other Citadel bosses also work just fine. And some of this footage even was recorded a few days ago where I didn't even fully optimize the build yet, so by now I almost got double the damage on the bosses. And here's just some random map bosses, some are with Sigil of Power, some are without. This is also not at the perfectly optimized state, so by now they would also go down much quicker. And now, last but not least, while we're looking at the last wave of max difficulty Simulacrum, I just want to talk a little bit about the build, about the budget you need, what the challenges are with this build, why it's so relatively simple to set up, and why it's so satisfying to play. So first of all, the problem you have with all cast on critical builds, which are not Blood Mage builds, is that the cast on critical, as soon as you reach like towards 100% crit chance, it just drains all of your mana on bosses pretty much instantly, because you're just gonna trigger so many cast on crits that you just cannot pay for it. Well, with the new Pathfinder Ascendancy now, we have a way of actually changing our int nodes to something which is called cost efficiency. So cost efficiency stat is very difficult to pick up, actually it's just in very few positions on the tree and usually very expensive to get. But now we can get 5% cost efficiency for basically every passing node, which allows us to get like 200 to 300% cost efficiency, which brings our Comet cost down to roughly 100 mana, which feels really awesome. And also with the current patch, they pretty much removed the movement speed penalty reduction. Well, great thing that the Pathfinder comes with an inherent 50% movement speed penalty reduction, which just feels so great when zooming through maps. And on top of that, the build is very versatile because the Pathfinder Ascendancy just allows you to put damage, defenses or cost efficiency whenever you want. And the build also being relatively budget friendly, you don't need any crazy stuff like Temporalis, Vertex helmets or whatever. You can pretty much just go with rare items as you go and keep advancing the build from there. In this build guide we talk about the skill gems, the items, the passive tree and the jewel choices. And also I have footage for the full Arbiter fight, the full max difficulty Xesht, the last two waves of Simulacrum, and an Overrun Abyss map for you. So make sure to check the description down below. You find the link with the planner and the path of building. You will also find the link to all the sections of this guide. And as always, also the list with all the trade links you need. And this guide also has a section where I explain how to use the weighted sums for trading, so you don't have to overpay for the gear. And I would also highly encourage you to leave a comment if you have questions. I usually answer all the comments. Also make sure to like and subscribe. It really helps me bringing you more content. But now, without further ado, let's go into the actual guide and start with the skill gems. Alright, let's take a look at the skill gems. So first of all, we run Sigil of Power on our weapon swap with Prolonged Duration 2 and Magnified Area 2. We're going to talk a little bit later about this because this has some conditional usage, especially on very rough maps. You might want to switch this for something else, but we're going to talk about this a little bit later. Then we have Spark, which is our main enabling skill here. So we are playing a cast on crit setup with Comet on cast on crit. So our main damage comes from Comet. That's why you don't see very high DPS on the Spark tooltip here. So we're running it with pinpoint critical. This just really gives you like a huge amount of crit chance, and you know, we lose a little bit of damage, which is not a big deal because we don't really need the Spark damage anyway. So my Spark is at 82%. There's some more conditional crit coming on the map, so you will be probably roughly at 90%. You know, if you aim for like something like 60 to 70%, you will be completely fine. You don't need every Spark to crit. There's way more than enough Sparks, and we have a high attack speed, high cast speed, so everything above 60% will be completely fine for your build. Then we have Projectile Acceleration 3 here, so mainly the projectiles just travel faster and do a little bit more damage. We have Blind 2, which basically blinds enemies, and we're gonna use this with the blindside support on our cast on critical. So this is, again, we're not focusing on the damage on Spark, we're really just using it to enable our Comet to do more damage. And on a regular map, we'll have way more than enough damage anyway, so we don't really need very high DPS on Spark. And with Mobility here, it's really just the best thing you can do on maps. In a boss fight, you can swap this out for efficiency. It really helps in the mana sustain with the boss fight to just have the spark cost a little bit more mana. But on a regular map, I would just run mobility. And then last but not least, we have rapid casting. So I'm not running like any considered casting or whatever, because again, I don't care so much about the spark damage. I more care about casting as many sparks as possible. And rapid casting too with mobility really just gives you a very smooth gameplay on the map. Then let's go on with our cast on critical. So this is the bread and butter of this build. So we run cast on critical with Comet here. And so there's a couple of important things to note here. First of all, as you can see, we don't run like the boundless energy, because yes, you can make it gain 45% more energy, which will technically give you more DPS. The problem is though, in boss fights, you're not going to sustain the mana anyway. So you kind of have to find a little bit of a balance how many comets you want to cast and how much damage they do, because if you technically try to get as many comets as possible out, you're just going to run out of mana. It's not going to work. So if we look at our comet tooltip here a little bit, we have like roughly, 200k hit damage on a regular comet. We have, 74% crit chance and 480% crit damage. This again on the map goes up. So it goes up to like roughly 80% with the conditional modifiers we have on the tree. And then we have the blind side, which gives another 15% more. So we're going to end up somewhere between like 90 and 100% crit, depending on the current setup. So this is not calculated in the DPS, so the real DPS would be much higher. But this comet really hits very, very hard. And I recommend to get like a level 21 Comet. They are not very expensive because they don't need to be 5 linked. You just need like 2 sockets or whatever, because it's just in the cast on crit setup anyway. Then we use the blind side, and as we talked about it, the spark is going to blind everything. So we can use blind side, which gives 15% more crit bonus and crit chance. So this is a very, very strong multiplier here. Then we use concentrated area. This is the strongest damage multiplier you can pretty much get on the Comet. And it also doesn't increase the cost, which is actually pretty expensive. Our main enemy in this build is mana sustain. So the more support gems we can use to reduce the cost, the better. Then that being said, we run efficiency 2 also on the Comet. Again, if you can work this without, can make this work without, be my guest, but I can't get it to work at all. I need to reduce the mana cost on this Comet as much as possible. And that's why we're running our only lineage gem here, which is, has a little bit of a cost. I think they're like 25 divines right now. It gives +1 level, which is basically just raw damage. It gives +10 quality, which basically makes the cast on crit cheaper on the spirit end, and it gives a cost multiplier of 90%, which is very, very important. So basically what it does is the cast on critical gets relatively cheap. As you can see, I have 149 spirit. If you put it off, I still have like 79, so this costs like whatever, like 60, 70 spirit, because this really has a cost and reservation multiplier. So the reservation gets decreased by 10% here. And then we also have +10 quality of supported skills, which on cast on critical again gives reservation efficiency. So we can run this cast on critically here for relatively cheap. All right, with that out of the way, let's talk about the supplementing skills here. So I have Mana Remnants and Siphon Elements here. This is an additional setup. You don't need to run any of these. These are just going to give you a little bit of quality of life. But if you don't have the spirit, it's totally fine to not run them. Also, if you don't like to run Convalescence, you can obviously also not run Convalescence if you don't want to. But I'm like running either Mana Remnants or Siphon Elements. And Mana Remnants I really just run for bosses, because this build is crazy mana hungry. And this at least generates 1 remnant every 2 seconds on a boss, so it quite of helps a little bit with mana sustain here. Siphon Elements is basically just on your map setup. It really helps you to get your frozen sparks out, and it also gives you like the comets which are fire infused, because fire infused comets actually do like 3 times the damage than a regular one. So if we look at the comet here, the regular one does 200k, right, and the fire infused does like almost 500k. So the fire infused comets do significantly more damage, also have more AoE and stuff like that. So Siphon Elements really help if you have the spirit. If you don't have the spirit, if you really don't have the budget to pick like up some extra spirit on your gear, don't sweat it. You don't need Mana Remnants, you don't need Siphon Elements. I would recommend to run Convalescence. If you don't even want Convalescence, you could also run like one of these. So you kind of have to try it out. The best is if you can actually have 2 of these, but if you only have 1, it's not such a huge deal. As for Mana Remnants, we run Harmonic Remnants and Remnant Potency here, because we're solely doing this for regenerating mana. For Siphon Elements, we run Harmonic Remnants and Fire Mastery here, so it just gets 1 extra level. Then again, speaking of Convalescence, it's just really, really strong defensively. We have like 10.6k energy shield, and it really, really helps me. I know a lot of people don't run it anymore. For me, it really, really helps me with survivability. If I can get into dicey situations, I just run Convalescence, and I really, really like to play it. We play it with Prolonged Duration 2, Cooldown Recovery 2, Rapid Casting 2, and I have my Clarity 1 in here because I still have enough Spirit to run this. This is obviously completely optional. If you don't have the Spirit to run the Clarity, just skip it. The next thing very important in this build is Mana Tempest. So Mana Tempest is actually crazy strong. So it gives you like 100% extra damage as lightning, and it also makes your spells split. So split is basically something like fork. I don't even know what it does, but it's basically fork. And so in this build, we don't running any chain or any fork or any pierce. So if you don't run anything like that, your sparks are going to be pretty weak if you are, fighting larger groups of mobs, so you always want to make sure to have Mana Tempest active. The mana cost of this is actually not dramatic. It doesn't really add so much mana cost that you can run it. It is really convenient, and it gives you a huge damage buff for like a very little investment. We run it with Efficiency 2, we run it with Cooldown Recovery 2, we run it with Lightning Mastery here, and we run it with Rapid Casting 2. So the way that it works, basically, you always want to have a Mana Tempest active, but you don't want to stand in it for too long. So if you drop it on the ground, right, and you stay in the Mana Tempest and you just keep casting, as you can see, it slowly drains you. It's not a huge deal, but now it starts like kind of draining you. And the problem is now if you leave the Mana Tempest, the effect doesn't end for like another 4 seconds. So you kind of want to, not overstay in a Mana Tempest. You want to leave your Mana Tempest, then cast, and then wait until it's over, and then you want to basically cast your next Mana Tempest, right? And then you're going to go on. And if you're running in a map, it's basically the same thing. You're just basically running. And, while you're running, you just drop your Mana Tempest and you just keep running, right? And now you can see the buff lasts for another 4 seconds. And as soon as it's over, you're just going to drop the next Mana Tempest and just keep casting. So this way, you're just going to do like an absurd amount of extra damage for like basically no investment whatsoever. So I really, really like Mana Tempest. It's a great ability here for almost no cost. You get like such a huge damage boost. So the next stuff is also like damage supplementation, really. Frost Bomb we use here. We use this Rapid Casting, Magnified Area, Potent Exposure, Spell Echo, and Overabundance. I know like people are running the shorter duration, like reduced duration, whatever it's called, compressed duration, I think. It doesn't really do anything. I know there's like a video from Crip. I mean, maybe I'm wrong there, but I tried it. So either if I do compressed duration or not, the only thing it does, it changes the duration of the exposure, but it doesn't change the detonation time or anything. So I don't see it. Maybe like I'm confused there. Maybe somebody let me know in the comment down below if I'm here correct, or you can test it yourself. But I was like testing this on compressed duration, literally just changed the exposure duration and nothing else. But yeah, this is really just for boss fights, but it also generates fire infusions, so you can use this to pre-buff for a boss fight or pre-buff like for a big abyss pit, because together with our, whatever this thing is called here, the elemental equilibrium we are picking up, it's basically going to create fire remnants, and the fire remnants give you like those juicy fire meteors. So that's basically why you can use it to buff yourself, but I usually don't do it. And then we are running Elemental Weakness. You can run Rakiata's Flow, but it's crazy expensive, and I feel like Elemental Weakness in most cases is just far superior above Rakiata's Flow. We run it with Heightened Curse, we run it with Curse Ground. We run it with Expand. I like this more than the Magnified Area because it makes it a little larger and you're just going to have those seals anyway. We run it with Prolonged Duration and Fire Mastery. So if you look at the size of these, like this is actually huge, and then you can just, drop a second one. And this will pretty much cover the entire boss area anyway. So I feel like this is, maybe it's not stronger than Rakiata's Flow, but it's certainly like a lot less expensive. So that's why I prefer to run Elemental Weakness. And last but not least, we have Orb of Storms. You can use this if you want. You don't have to at all. It adds like a tiny bit of extra DPS. It crits very good. It does decent damage, but you don't have to do this. It's just really, if you want to do it, it also creates like the frost infusions, right? So it gives you like a little bit more juice, a little bit more damage, but it's definitely optional. You don't have to drop it. But if you want to use it, I also use it with Rapid Casting, Overabundance 2, Lightning Mastery, Unleash, and Pinpoint Critical here. So one more thing I want to talk about is Sigil of Power. So what you're doing is basically, if you want to use Sigil of Power while you're in a map, As you can see, we have 10.6k energy shield right now. But a lot of energy shield comes from our focus, because we use jewels which buff focus energy shield, because they are relatively easy to get and they really give you like a huge amount of extra energy shield. And the problem is now, if you want to run Sigil of Power, or also like just want to run Elemental Weakness mid-map, because for example, if you're playing like Abyss Pits and you want to, you know, drop your Elemental Weakness on an Abyss Pit, your problem is it's going to switch to the weapon set and you're going to lose half of your energy shield. So I'm now at 5.8k, and even if I switch back, as you can see, it needs to regenerate. So I do not recommend running the Sigil of Power stuff while you're like mapping. You don't need it for map boss. Sigil of Power, you really don't need it for map bosses. It's really just good for like very strong pinnacle bosses, or maybe Citadel bosses if you like to, but I would not recommend using this on a regular map. So what I do basically, if I'm just mapping, I just don't use this stuff. And then you want to lock your weapon set. So by lock your weapon set, you just basically right-click on this one here, and now it's locked. You can see it also in this little window. And you have to make sure it's by default not going to lock your focus. So if you just do this and you would imagine this locks both weapon sets, no, it doesn't. So it's not going to lock your focus. So you want to make sure to also lock your focus. So you can see the focus locked here. And now, as you can see, I have 10.6k, yes. If I now drop my curse mid, like, mid-map, I'm not dropping in energy shield. So that's a very, very important thing. So if you really want to like do this in mapping, I highly recommend not use the chiming stuff in a mapping setup. Alright, let's talk about our items. So first of all, you want to have a wand which just has spell and elemental damage. You don't want to have lightning damage or any kind of specific damage, because we do Comet. So worst case, you would get one with cold damage, because Comet is going to do most of the damage, but also the fire-infused Comet will do fire damage. So I highly recommend trying to get a wand with spell damage and elemental damage. The gain as extra is nice. It doesn't really matter which one you get, just gain as extra is just nice in general. Crit chance is very nice, and cast speed is very nice. And, you know, you want to have +1 skilled socketed. That is pretty cheap right now. And if you have a 2-socket one, you want to socket critical hit chance for spells. Then as for our focus, you want to have a +2 focus with cast speed and as much energy shield as possible. If you cannot get like a very good one with cast speed and resistance and stuff like that, just focus on +2 and as much energy shield as possible. This is really important for our dual choices in this build. You don't have to do this, but I highly recommend trying to get a very high energy shield focus here. Then for a helmet, again, I'm trying to just get a high energy shield helmet with, you know, intelligence and resistances. You want to pick up a good amount of intelligence from your gear, because that's later going to help us with sustaining our, which just equipping our skills, because we want to basically in our skill tree, we don't want to get any intelligence. Since we're Pathfinder, we can get much more stuff, like we can get, you know, defenses or damage or cost reduction, which is very important. So try to pick up energy shield, try to pick up intelligence on the helmet. Rarity is nice, but again, focus on high energy shield here. And we're using the increased cost efficiency rune here, the idol of Xesht. That is also very important. For a chest piece, get as much energy shield as possible, and try to get intelligence double rest. You don't need the spirit if you don't want it. So in an ideal setup, you will get like a 49 or something like that. Maybe 48 is enough, but probably you need 49 to run all your spells. If you can't get this, or just get like a, 31, so you basically, just cannot run like the extra siphon elements or mana remnants, it's not a big deal. You can also pick up spirit as a corrupted enchant on your helmet or on your amulet, but I would highly focus on just try to get like a very high energy shield chest piece here. Then for our amulet, you want to get one with, rarity is nice, obviously, but you want to get a lot of energy shield and global defenses, cast speed, and level of all spell skills, and maybe, rarity is nice. I bought this one sanctified. It has cooked on it. It's not optimal, but I can still use it. We're going to talk about this a little bit later in the passive tree. For your rings, you want to strictly get mana, cast speed, resistance, and mana regeneration and rarity if you can get it. These rings are pretty good actually, but so you don't have to get these. If you buy these, you can buy these for much cheaper, maybe just skipping the rarity or something like that. You can buy like rings like this for like a couple of divs and then just, slam the increased maximum mana in the prefix. You most of the time, the prefix, if you just have a good maximum mana roll in the prefix, you have a 66% chance of, not deleting your mana roll. So it's usually pretty easy to make these yourself. If you're trying really to get these with the mana roll already on them, they will get quite expensive, but it's actually much easier to just make these with, buy these without the increased maximum mana roll in the prefix and then just slam it on there. This ring is pretty much exactly the same. Like it's like interesting how identical these rings are. Like they're pretty much a little bit different in the cast speed, but they're almost the same. So yeah, try to get rings like that. So for the gloves, you can get gloves like these, but they are crazy expensive right now. You don't need the rarity, but even without the rarity, just trying to get the Arcane Surge on crit and 60% increased effect of socketed items is crazy expensive. So you can either just buy regular gloves and desecrate the 13% chance to gain Arcane Surge on it yourself, or you can just go for regular gloves. Also, if you're like on a budget, you can also go for Night Scale, which are pretty good. The increased mana regeneration helps a lot, and they also have like critical hit chance. And you can get these like 3-socketed, for example, to just fix, a good amount of resistances. So if you're like on a little bit of a budget, you can also absolutely run these. If you want to run these, you want to have the Korgal's Gaze one here for the, increased effect of Arcane Surge. And maximum mana is very nice. Don't care too much about the energy shield roll, honestly. Like if you have one with 50, which is far cheaper, doesn't matter at all. So really maximum mana, increase of effect of socketed items, and the Arcane Surge would be, mandatory here. But again, you can also use this to fix the resistance. It's like a little bit of an optional slot, right? As for the boots, I use 2-socketed boots with movement speed and just fix another resistance here. I just get like one cold resistance and again an intelligence roll. As we talked about, intelligence rolls are pretty important in this build. Last but not least, Headhunter. I guess at this stage in the game, you want to have a Headhunter. I always get like a Headhunter with a corrupted resistance because it's really hard to fix resistances if you're like that, deep in a game where you're like using rings which like have a lot of stats and you cannot really pick up resistance everywhere. So for me, it really helps to pick up a Headhunter with resistance. If you don't have a Headhunter yet, you can obviously use an Ingenuity or like a resistance fixing belt, but I really recommend to run a Headhunter with pretty much every single build right now. As for the flask, the life flask doesn't matter. I don't even know why I have it on it. It's like completely irrelevant. And as for the mana flask, you want to have a high amount of instant recovery with increased charges, because this is your mana fix on the bosses. If you're fighting hard bosses, you run out of mana, you will have to spam your instant flask to get back up to mana. Otherwise, you will just run around with 0 mana, which is not going to be very pleasant to do. So really recommend to get a recovery applied instantly with increased charges. As for the charms, I don't run anything special. I just run the Nask and Hope, for freeze here. I just run a random dowsing charm here because Ignite is crazy right now, and I just run a random gold charm, so I don't even have like a rite of passage or anything. So this is a pretty basic setup. Then as for the weapon swap, we already talked about it. I just have a chiming stuff. Really, the stats on that do not matter at all. You just really want to have +5 level of all spell skills, or you can also get like one with lightning skills. Totally fine, just get basically any with high skills, and cast speed is nice, but it's also not really needed since you're just using this to pre-buff anyway. You could probably just put some curse effect, stuff like that on it, but it really doesn't matter in the end. And as we already talked about it, in a mapping setup, I would recommend to not run this. I would just run the chiming stuff while fighting bosses. Taking a look at the passive tree, we basically take full advantage of what the Pathfinder is offering us. So if you look at this tree right now, we're basically just, rushing to like this outer loop, and then we just go outer loop and jewel slots. So we really just skip one in the very middle, because the very last one is going to be fairly inefficient to get, because we don't really need a full circle, obviously. But then we really just loop the entire tree and just get the good stuff at the tree. So this is like our main thing. Why we do this? Well, because the small nodes on the Pathfinder allow us to get coast efficiency and damage. So as I already said, mana cost is your biggest problem in this build, because the way it works, your cast on critical, if you select your cast on critical Comet here, you can see this just cost 119 mana now. So if you look at the original cost of this Comet, how much mana it costs, if I can find it, blah blah blah, where is it? Okay, I'm not very smart. So if you look at the original cost of this Comet, This has a mana cost of 528. So if you would be at a high mana cost, like let's even make it 200 mana, this is gonna instantly drain you out of mana. It's gonna drain you to 0. You're gonna drop so many meteors on the bosses, it's just really gonna eat up all your mana. So that's why we're basically abusing the Pathfinder to get as much mana cost efficiency as possible. I mean, you have to kind of balance it out, how many mana cost and how many damage nodes you get. I have like roughly 50-50 cost efficiency node, I would say, and at some point, you know, I will have damage node, but I have a lot of cost efficiency nodes, right? And here I have like some damage nodes, so I don't know the exact ratio. You have to figure this out on your own, but I think I'm running roughly 50-50 damages and cost efficiency here. So you really have to get a feeling for this, how to balance it. Also, if you're like still in the early game and you struggle with defenses, you can still, you know, swap some for defenses. So it's a very, very versatile class here with the Pathfinder. So let's actually look at it. So why Pathfinder? What makes it so awesome? So first of all, you're unaffected by slows. This is really, really nice, right? These nodes give skill speed, which is also pretty nice. And this one here is you cannot be heavy stunned by sprinting, which is awesome. If you're sprinting, you cannot just accidentally, you know, get stunned. For example, if you're like, you know, getting chased by the crazy bird in the ultimatum. And this gives you 50% less movement speed penalty by using skills. So this feels really, really good because this stat has basically removed from the game and you still get 50%, which is just such an awesome bonus. So I really love the class for this. And then on the other end, you obviously get like the 6 extra passive skill points. You can allocate from the sorceress, which I don't really, you know, doesn't really matter all that much, to be honest. And this is like the most important here, the Traveler's Vision. So you can get the extra node. So if you're like not having your force, your 8, like your force ascendancy, 8 points, whatever yet, I would recommend not use this one here. So I would go for these 2 and then this, or for, because this really just feels so good on mapping, right? And then yeah, so you can, if you want to have like a little bit more movement speed, so this build is very versatile, right? So you can swap it out like the way you want. Yeah, you can, for example, you know, remove a little bit of damage here and then, you know, get your 8% movement speed in this cluster if you want. You can, you know, these 2 movement speed points are like completely interchangeable with other stuff. So it's a really, really changing, like if you want to go into more movement speed, it's really easy to do with this build. If you want to go into more energy shield, you can always spec into this, you know, patient barrier, or you can swap these to the defense ones. So you really, really can do a lot of stuff. But let's just talk about what we're doing. So some things to note, obviously we're running CI here, so we are immune to chaos. You want to get this Eldritch Will for the ailment threshold and stun threshold. Playing with old ailment and stun threshold, you're not going to have a very good time. If you're running a pinnacle boss, you can remove these and, you know, spec into some extra damage. But as soon as you're like running any maps, you want to have this 3 points. And you want to have Elemental Equilibrium. It's really nice on the high end. You know, if you feel you don't need it, you can spec out of it, but I really like having this. And besides that, you know, I'm pretty much just getting these ones here, which are pretty nice for triggered spells. Again, our most important stat here is our meteor damage, and this just gives like a good amount of extra damage to a meteor and also some mana cost efficiency. Besides that, I'm really just running crit. Like I'm getting all the good crit nodes. I'm getting this triggered crit node here, which does not get displayed in the tooltip, so that's like another 25%, and also energy gain, so it's very nice. But then yeah, I'm just getting all the crit nodes which are here around the tree. And this movement speed and skill speed here is just too good to like not use. But that's pretty much all we're getting here in our weapon set. In our weapon set 2, I'm really just picking up some duration here, some area of effect and some curse effect. You can get a little bit more curse effect here if you want to ditch the area of effect for maybe like min-maxing against bosses or stuff like that. But that's pretty much how we run it. And then these nodes are just very valuable. This is like 40% damage and 15% crit chance. It's a very, very valuable node. And this one just gives elemental rest, which is very hard to fix in this build. This one here, you can also go like through here to get like a little bit more damage, but I felt like I don't need it. This is like the little bit I can still optimize. If I can pick up 20 more int, I can get a little bit more stats, but this is right now pretty much as min-maxed as it gets. And so one more thing I want to talk about is the cooked anoint. So I have this cooked anoint on my amulet. I don't think this is ideal. I guess in an ideal setup, it would be better to just pick this up manually, the cooked, because it's really, really strong. But So yeah, I think it would be better to pick up something like, you know, for example, like Barbaric Strengths on your amulet, and then, you know, pass to the cook manually. There's other stuff you can get as an anoint, so I think this is not the perfect anoint, but I just happen to have this amulet, and yeah. So let's look at our jewels. So I try to get as many double crit jewels as possible. I still can optimize a lot, but this is, for example, a very good one. These are very hard to get, but mainly I'm trying to get maximum energy shield from focus, and double crit. It doesn't have to be double chance, it can also be crit and bonus. And since I'm running an Adorned here, which I'm going to also talk about it a little bit later, I have all my jewels corrupted. But this is like kind of the jewels I'm going for. Other good stats are, again, this is again another one which has, you know, double crit spell damage, and focus is also pretty nice. Then we here have one, this is also double crit with energy shield and focus. And here's another one which has also double crit and just energy shield. So mine are not perfect, right? This is missing focus here. And we have some few more, like this one here. Again, this has just one crit, so you don't have to get double crit, yeah, right? The availability on those is pretty low. Also, a nice stat is skill effect duration you can get on here. But I would really try to focus on maximum energy shield from equipped focus ones. That is really the strongest stats you can get, you know, as if you ask me. And again, this has also crit chance and skill effect duration, stuff like that. This also has a crit chance and skill effect duration. So I would have to optimize these, because these have been from like an earlier setup. So I guess ideally you want to get crit chance and crit damage instead of the skill effect duration. So I will make another pass on the jewels to squeeze out some more DPS. But that's kind of what you're looking for. So you're looking for crit stats, energy shield, and energy shield from equipped focus. And a good secondary stat is really just skill effect duration. Spell damage you cannot really get because it's also in the prefix, but this is kind of what I'm looking for, and I would absolutely try to focus on maximum energy shield from focus, and one crit stat. You can even get 0 crit stats, but I would highly recommend focusing those defensive layers. So then, as for the unique jewel, I just have one unique jewel, which is going to be the Heart of the Well. So I'm picking up a Heart of the Well. Basically, you just want to have any gain damage. It doesn't really matter which one. Fire, cold, lightning, completely irrelevant. It has some crit bonus. The important line would be the recover 2% mana on kill. I'm getting it on this jewel. So I highly recommend getting 2% mana on kill and 15% cost efficiency and any gain damage. The fourth line is not really important. These should be fairly cheap, to be honest. If you don't want to get them, like very good. Just one gain, 2% mana on kill, and cost efficiency. So that's what I'm recommending. Then I'm running an Adorned. So I happened to pick this up before they got crazy expensive. So this is a 38% increase. You don't have to run this. So it's really not required. If you switch this out by another rare jewel, you would be surprised how little you actually lose. So as you can see, if I take out this, I have a 10.6 KES, right? So this just drops me like by roughly 2,000 energy shield, but if I would put in another jewel in this slot, I would go to like 9.5. So this maybe is like 10% on the top end, maybe it's like 15%. So it's really not important to get this. If you can't get this, don't sweat it, just use another rare jewel. It's also a little bit of a relief if you don't have to get corrupted jewels, because, you know, I bought a lot of expensive jewels and I bricked them when corrupting. So if you just use regular rare jewels, which do not have to be corrupted, you know, it's also like a little bit of an advantage over the Adorned. So really highly recommend not get this unless you can afford it. It's absolutely not required. Don't tell me after this, yeah, this build is only going to work with Adorned. It really doesn't. So even, you know, even if I take this out, right, and I go to the 8.7, or even by not taking in another one, you can see it's still like 66% crit and 178 damage. And if I put this back in, we're gonna be at, you know, 74% crit and 196. So it's really not such a huge scaler to your damage. It does a good job, but it's definitely not worth mirrors at this point, right? This is like one of the most expensive items you can get, and it's definitely not worth the price for it. If you have a mirror, you can get so much better stuff. You can get like the +4 helmet and stuff like that. You can get like a really sick +5 wand or whatever. So really, you can get like a not megalomaniac. You can get Prison of Belief with Comet, stuff like that. So really, I highly recommend not go for the Adorned unless you picked it up cheap earlier in the league. Alright, how do you use my trade links? For my build guys, I post trade links, so you can pretty much exactly buy the gear I have, but you can adjust it to your budget, and I have pretty easy methods to do this. So first of all, if you are on the Mobalytics guide, always just click on the How It Works section. In the How It Works section, it actually will show you trade links. This is not complete yet, but it's going to be complete once the video is uploaded. But let's take this example. There is going to be a wand. So you click on the wand, and now you get the trade link. And if you have the trade link now, basically you're just going to see shit in the beginning. So how it works is I always use weighted sums. So this one, for example, has a weighted sum which has all the stats which are good for us inside. And it's basically automatically handling the work. However, there's a couple of things you need to adjust accordingly. First of all, if you have a maximum level, put your maximum level in. Second of all, put your budget. So if your budget is not 400 Exalted Orb equivalent, which is like 4 divines right now for a wand, so let's say yours is just 100, right? So you just adjust it accordingly. And then you order by the weighted sum. So you click on this sum here. And now you will see the best wand for your build at the very top. So this has the highest sum of everything for you. So you can see for just 50 exalts, you get this wand with +5 physical, with cast speed, with spell damage, with extra cold damage, with maximum mana, and with mana per enemy killed. And you can just scroll down and, find whatever fits best your build. But usually you can blindly trust these weighted sums unless you're like looking for something specific. Maybe you want to fix your mana regen, so you always might want to, for example, if you really are low on mana regeneration, you might, add an extra stat to your sum that it has to have mana regeneration, so you will now only find the one which fits your budget best, but has mana regeneration in this case instead of cast speed. So this is basically how I use my trade links. So first step, always make sure to fill in the budget you want to pay for this item, then order by the weighted sum and potentially put in your level. This is for weapons and jewelry, and then sometimes if you want to buy armor pieces, there's always going to be one more condition, which is going to be energy shield. So this, for example, is the focus, right? If you don't have a budget of 200 or whatever, let's say you have a budget of 100 for the focus. Again, here you can see focus matching the query. And, if these are too expensive, let's say you're like on a budget, right? You only want to spend like 10x. You can even find one here, so this might be good for you. But let's say this doesn't fit you. For armor pieces, you might want to reduce the energy shield, which I always include here. So you might go down to like 250 now, and now you will find like a lot of foci which basically fit your budget. So this build is really pretty budget friendly, so you can just buy like these for like 10 exalts each if you just, go down on the energy side a little bit. But this is how you use my trade links.
Believe me, you will fall, Exile. Keep your precious sanity, my agent of chaos.
Good news for you.